Welcome back. Just a couple days after Christmas and I'm getting back at it after the holidays. I hope everybody had the good holidays. And I'm out here in the shop, in the cold storage shop, no heat, but it's pretty nice today. It's going to be probably 50 degrees out here in western Nebraska. So I wanted to get some of this work done that I have to do out in the shop where the torch and the air is, to work on the differential. I have to rivet together the bevel gears along with the chain drive gear. I have to press the main shaft into the differential carrier. So I want to get those two things done today, and then I can move back inside and start assembling the differential and getting it in the transmission case. Here's what I'm going to attempt today. I've already riveted this set of gears together. It's got a chain drive gear on one side and then the bevel gear that goes against the spider gears on the differential. And I acquired a rivet gun that would rivet those over with a nice round head on them and look pretty nice. That's a 5/8 rivet, and then the head on it is 1 inch around. And it was kind of difficult to find a tool that would do that, but I finally came up with one and I'm happy with how it works. And I'll demonstrate that here in a minute, but this one I've got ready to rivet together. I got a rivet in here that just test fitting it, and then I bolted the two gears together with a couple bolts so that everything would line up as I get the rivets hot and assemble it and rivet the rivets down. As you can see, this tag came off the gear. It's a 947R gear differential sprocket for 30,451 on up on the serial number. So from the very first ones, probably up to 1931, I would guess that they use this assembly. But I'll set up and so I can heat up the rivet and stick it in there and get the rivet gun going and rivet those down. This rivet is the same rivet that goes in the 12-spoked wheel too on the rear of the D. So I got some rear wheels that have some bolts in them. The rivets must have come out or broke out, or they replaced the hub, or I'm not sure, but I have a few wheels that need some rivets in it, so I'm going to use this same gun to do that. So I'm ready to put the rivets in. I made this set that bolts to my anvil with the divot in it for the rounded head on the bottom side to set in. And then I set that on there when I get the rivet red hot, and then I hammer down on the top. So I'll get a rivet heated up here. Got to get it heated up cherry red. And this has got a round overhead in it, 1 inch around. And you just set it down on there and just like so. Starting to get a little hot. And there we go. That's the back side. Looks like a factory job. Okay, well, I'll go gather the parts in the other assembly room and lay them out and show you and start assembling. Keep watching. As we start to put the differential together, I have to press the new shaft into the new differential carrier. And I've got a couple marks here, the center mark of the shaft and then the mark where it has to come up to the hub here. So I'm going to press that in. I've got it all set up in the press here to push that in. I'm out in the cold shop today, but it's not too bad of a day. It's a couple days after Christmas, and it's probably going to be 50 degrees here in western Nebraska today. I think it's right in there. I made a mark on this side too, but it might have wiped it off going through there, but it was up on a little shoulder. I think maybe I'll go just a touch more. Okay, that should be about in the center. Welcome back, everybody. It's the new year in 2025, and I'm getting a little time to work on the D again. And today I'm going to be assembling the differential and trying to get that in the case. And with that, we'll get started. Make sure if you like this content that you like and subscribe. It's a little heavy to get lifted up onto the bench, so I'm working down here on the floor. I've got 2 of the spider gears in, and I was going to show you how I put those spider gears in. Here's a new shaft and a new gear. And this shaft is a 195R, still in the sleeve. And then it takes a thrush washer on the inside, on the outside, where the gear pushes up against the carrier. So I'm putting a little grease on that to give it a little bit of pre-lube. Put the hole towards the inside, so when I get the gear on there, I can push that in there, and then I'll put the keyway in there. But first of all, I want to put a little grease on that shaft. I'm going to pull it back out. Make sure where the hole is. Get it straight up and down. And then put the gear in. The spider gears have got to go in there first, because once you put the bowl gears on the outside of the differential carrier, why you can't get to the pin anymore. So got to put those in first. Kind of seat that down in there. This is a new gear. It's the smaller bowl gear. And it goes on the brake side. And then the bolts go through that hold it all together. And I want to put the heads on this side towards the brake, because that'll give more room for the brake band to work and not catch the bolt heads. So a lip that has to drive down around to center it. Now a little bit with the drill. Let's see if this fits on there. This is the bigger gear. I couldn't find a new one of these, so I found a pretty good used one. Everything else is new, except for that gear. The new carrier and the new center shaft. As you can see over here, new bearings. And there's a lip all the way around that those gears seat into. A machined lip. And then there'll be a double nut on those too. The earlier ones are riveted on. And also the bolts were all equidistant around. For some reason they went to a pattern of 3 and then 1 and 3 and 1 and 3. So when you're putting differentials together, you gotta make sure you got all the bolt holes correct on all 3 pieces. And the bolts came off of the used tractor, so they're not new either. They're pretty tight. Like I said, they originally, in the early tractors, they riveted those together. I would say probably the square-headed bolts and the square-headed nuts are probably correct for the vintage. Now we'll put a little grease on this shaft. And put the newly riveted bevel gear on. If you missed me riveting those gears together on the last video, you can go back and look at it. There's a little dowel that goes in there, but I actually ended up with some of those new little dowels. They're a D186R. They have a little taper on them, so they'll start in, I think, and then this washer goes on there. It fits in the dowel. And then the race, inner race, it's an inner race 301, and that drives on there. And then the bearings, which is a 7782, don't know if it's got the John Deere number on it, but that's the Hyatt number. So there's a shiny side to this washer and a dull side. I'm guessing to put the shiny side towards the bearing, though the bevel gear and chain drive gear is going to work on the inside, but for the most part it's all going to be running on the shiny side anyway. And then this one here, this is a D, I think 140R. They are shiny on one side. So I'm guessing the dull side, the unfinished side, goes on the outside. The shiny side, the milled side goes towards the bearing on both, I think. And then the bolts go through there. And then it runs tight, but I think the race was longer than the actual inside, so there's another washer, and it has it in the parts book, and they call it a thrust washer, but I'm not sure where that goes, but it's a good possibility that it should go in there, because the inside race would be about the thickness of the bearing plus the thrust washer. So I'm thinking that probably is there to take up side-to-side play inside the case when you install the differential. So we have to drive this on there. Usually, when I've taken these out of a used case, these just drop off, so they get to spinning on the shaft, I suppose. But with everything being new, they're a tight fit. And then I put the bearing on, and probably the thrust, and then the end plate. This is my guess, that's how it's supposed to run. I've also thought about putting the washer on the inside, but it's way bigger than that shaft, so it's not likely that's where that goes. I drive it in just far enough so I think I could drive it in far enough just to where that outside gear would come off. I don't think it's necessarily needed. Still looks pretty good. It's got to be 80 years old, that bearing. And that's about as far as we can go right here, because there's not enough clearance to get between the sides of the case to get the differential in there if I put the washer and the bolts through there. But there's got to lube up the bearing and then put the washer on the outside and the 2 cap screws with a wire tied so it all stays together. And also one other thing, when I was showing you previously when I was pressing that shaft through the differential carrier, I went and got my 2 bevel gears and put them in there, and then I centered that shaft in there, so I had to press one way or the other to get that centered exactly right, so that I had the clearance in here so they didn't bind. So as you can see, there isn't a lot of clearance. There's probably a 16th on both sides. So I will set up to start dropping it in the case. I'll go set up for that. Okay, we're going to start to assemble this quill on the left-hand side of the differential. Here's a new outside race out of the box, and that goes in first. One piece I don't have new. I had to use used snap rings on those, but all the bearings are new. The quills are new. Okay, and then I'll put a little grease in there. And then this is another one of those 684Rs that the book says is in there. And I'm just guessing where it goes, but I'm putting it down inside there so that the side to side play is taken up. And then when I finalize, I'll come and pull those quills out a little bit and put a little bit of sealer behind the other side of the gasket and put some sealer around the bolt holes, the bolts and the threads, so they don't leak. Okay, now I'll move over to the other side of the case and install that. I'm back at the main case now. This is the inside of the transmission, the axle hubs sticking in there, and that's the reverse shaft down there that we put in earlier. And now I got to set screw that in, because in my opinion that's probably the first shaft that needs to be put in and secured. and then we'll put in the differential and then line up side to side the idler gear and set the set screws on that, so that's all in line. But for now, I'm coming out here and I'm gonna put a little aviation sealer in that hole, just like we did on the camshaft follower shaft, and put some down that set screw hole, because that's a spot where it'll leak quite a bit if it's not sealed up well. So, okay, so here's the reverse idler shaft housing hole, and I'm going to put some aviation sealer in there, a pretty good amount. And then I will push the shaft back. I want some sealer to go and fill up that set screw hole, so that's good and full of sealer. Then I will slide the shaft back. There's a detent in that shaft that set screw screws up into. That set screw holds it from moving back and forth and also from spinning, so it's got a detent in there, probably 1/2 inch to 3/4. Tighten that up good, and then tighten up the jam nut. Now, I thought there was supposed to be room for a Welch plug. Apparently not. So we'll just wipe off the excess. At least that gives it a fighting chance of not leaking. And then I'll set up to show you as I drop in the differential carrier. Okay, I've got it set over the case now. I got a new brake band here, and it was a lot bigger around than what it is now, so I kind of fitted it to the hub, the brake hub, so it kind of fits on there, kind of loose, but pretty well conformed to the size of the brake drum. And so now I'm going to start lowering it down in. The wider part of the case is up front across here. It's narrower back here. And the less amount you have in there, like the axle housings and the other shafts, the better off you are to try to get that down in there. So I think I'm going to try to tilt it a little. Try to get one side down in there first. I think that looks pretty good. Just keep lowering it down in there. I should probably show you how much room I do not have here. If I bring it around back here, you can maybe see a little bit better of how I have to get it in there. It's like docking to the space station. You got to maneuver a little bit here and there to get that in there, because it's kind of a tight fit. That could possibly work. Let it go a little bit more. Okay. See if I can straighten it back up. You want to have your brake band on there because you'd have to deform it so bad to get it around your brake drum once your differential is in there. Okay, it caught my shirt. Now if we come ahead a little bit. Catching underneath the, gonna have to angle it into the quill holes too. Lift it up just a little bit. Okay, we're getting close now. That looks really good. Down just a touch maybe, and then we'll get the brake fed up through the hole. And if I can remember what I did with the nut, we put the nut on there. There's a little detent, kind of a keyway in that reverse shaft that those set screws set into. Kind of get those started. Got that mesh, that all looks good. We got to put this bearing in there and a washer. And I'm not sure, I think that, well, I'm not sure if the thrust washer, I think I'll wait to see if the thrust washer goes on the outside first. I think I'll put a little grease on these. These should pretty readily get oil from the transmission case, but just some pre-lube would be nice, I think. And I'm going to put the milled surface to the bearing. So now I've got the quill ready. I put a new outside race in the quill. The quill's new. Got a new gasket. Put a little sealer on the inside. Probably when I get all done, I'll have to pull it back off and put some sealer on the outside after I'm sure everything fits. But I put that thrust washer in here. It's a little thin washer. I'll show you when I do the other side, but I put it down in there, and we'll see if I have side-to-side clearance for that. I might have to go in and take it back out. I'm just not sure where that thrust washer is supposed to go, but that's my best guess. There we go. Okay, now we'll work on the other side. Okay, we're on the left-hand side of the case here, and we're gonna grease up this bearing, new bearing. Probably a lot of you are wondering where I get all my parts. Well, I've probably been doing this for at least 20 years, coming across parts, and I don't know, just lately, well, probably about 5 years ago, I thought, well, I might be getting enough parts I could almost build a D. Been working up to this for probably the last 5 years. And since it's going to turn 100 next year, or this year, I guess it's the new year today, it's going to turn 100 this year, and maybe it'll run again, hopefully. I'm sure there was an art to tying these wires. And the guys that did it back in the day probably could do it in 1/10 of the time it takes me. I think I'm ready to go together with my quill. Got the bearing, the thrust washer, the gasket all in there. It's a new quill, got older paint on it. Okay, we'll let the pressure off the jack and see if it's tight or loose. I think it seems pretty darn good. It seems like it's got really good tolerances to it. Everything turns nice and free, but there's no side to side, so I think it's going to be right. That's it for this episode. Keep watching and we'll see you down the road. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Tractor.